thought were really necessary to ensure we had the highest level of adoption that we were looking for. So saw lots of promise in what I was hearing from Kimberly and her program, so immediately signed up and actually went with the coaching program you'll hear a bit more about later. Went through that and eventually certified in the program, and along the way we started dialogue around, hey, why don't we bring this to Canada? There's such great material here. There's lots of folks who could benefit. Many of us have kind of foundational elements in the area of change management, but wanting to go further. So here we are. It's finally happened. We've been working together over the past year to make this a reality, and the webinars really start setting the stage for the program that's to come. Let's go to the next slide. So there's me. So obviously all lines are muted. You're welcome to toss questions forward. We'll try and get to those at the end. We've allocated time for that. The session will be recorded, so replay will be available if you need to duck out early. I've had folks ask as well, they can't make one session or the other. Will there be a replay? So we'll do that for the webinar number 2 as well if you can't actually attend that session. So we'll have questions at the end as noted. Next slide. And a quick introduction. So as I mentioned, Kimberly is a powerful speaker, but has the credentials to go along with it. So obviously having worked with senior level executives successfully for a long period of time, and it's really through those experiences she's been able to develop this program and really inject into it all these learnings. I know she'll say some through hard lessons, but seeing the successes out of adopting many of the skills you're going to hear about today. So you can see lots of background in various different areas, from sales to HR to continuous improvement with background in Sigma. And we share also some education, so both of us having a background in IO psychology. So I think with that, we'll move forward. Next one. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Kimberly. I just want to acknowledge before we do that, again, so many people on the line, all different areas. I see folks coming in from change management, from business development, communications. We've got business analysts on the line, folks in the training domain, folks in the marketing domain, some of the bigger players like Synovus and SAP, NMAX. We've got Enbridge, UFAs on the line, so great representation today. So with that, Kimberly, I will turn it over to you.
Well, that is so fantastic. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and hello to everyone in Calgary. I hope you're all doing great today. Good afternoon. As Jeff said, my name is Kimberly. Feel free to chatting questions along the way. Jeff is going to give me a hand fielding some of those, and we will have 5 to 10 minutes set aside at the end to address those as well. This is part 1 of a 2-part series. I used to do one webinar that contained all of this, and just found that I really like to share a lot of content. Just found that it was a little bit too much for the time. And so today we're going to talk about first the strategic backdrop of change management versus change leadership. Where really are we today? And you'll have a chance to do an assessment around that for yourselves. The second objective, understanding the concept of professional net worth and evaluating each of our own professional net worth characteristics. And then third, opening for the first time the door into the 7 strategic engagement skills that can help you get to higher levels of professional net worth, which includes delivering more value at your companies first and foremost. So as we're getting rolling here, let me point your attention to, you should be able to see under handouts, 2 handouts for you. The first one is change capability gap assessment. The second one is professional net worth. If you're in a place that you can pull those down and print those, that would be ideal. Pen and paper is a little bit dated, but I do think that there's lots of learning that comes from the hand-mind connection. So go ahead and print those out if you can. If you can't, feel free to take notes in your journal or just on a sheet of paper. But we really want to try to create something visual for you today that helps you start to see the patterns of where you are in each of these. So let's first focus on the first objective, really understanding what's the landscape of change today. And the facts are, based upon our research and other folks' research, and probably your own anecdotal experiences, the bar definitely continues to go up around the change capability that's needed in organizations and among individuals today. And this includes the ability to manage the people side of changes that organizations are experiencing. And I really think about it this way. So first, we need to think about the level of turbulence we are experiencing in the environment in which we work, in the industry, in the local geography. And my sense is that there's a fair amount of turbulence in your market today. And at the same time, think about, well, what level of results do we have to be able to deliver no matter the environment that we find ourselves in? And that starts to help us understand the level of capabilities that we need to have to be able to do that. So the first level of capability, and there's not many companies that are here anymore, but I can tell you I have worked with a few. They really have people in the organization who are using very simple tactics to manage large-scale changes in the organization. They lean heavily on communication as a way to get changes across. Lots of times the people who are doing it are invisible, right? So you just see emails, you hear some things are going on, you might see some posters, really tactical kinds of stuff, and you've got people who are sort of working in the background, in the shadows, as a pair of hands, just to make the organization aware of what's happening. This is effective when you're in a low turbulence, low results environment, but obviously if you're working in an environment that requires much more than that, it certainly isn't enough, but it is a starting place. The second level of capability is around change management. And here you see organizations and individuals inside companies start to shift to more of a technical professional who is bringing a set of tools and a set of skills. Oftentimes it's positioned as helping the organization to prepare for changes that are coming. The challenge here is that the tools don't always resonate with executives in particular, and so uptake and having to sell ourselves in and explain the value that we bring and create a business case around change management. Those are some of the kinds of things that happen when you or your company is in this stage of development. Really a role player who's adding value and doing something effective. But the challenge is that it isn't necessarily being received by the organization in such a way that it delivers the business results in the environment. The third level, and there's been really a lot of progress here in the last 5 to 7 years, I would say, and really bringing some business justification to change management and really being able to quantify the human risks and starting to build capabilities in the organization around managing those risks. So here's where you start to see change management offices, PMOs that have highly qualified change management people in them who are really partnering and accepted by the business, who are offering the expertise and feedback, and that information that they're providing to the business is actually being enacted in the business. So in other words, it's not enough just to say, well, we use risk frameworks and we've got some change managers. The idea here is that you are viewed by the business as a value added partner and are accepted into their circle of influence. The third one is change leadership, and change leadership really starts to focus on the fundamental behaviors that are needed by leaders across the organization. The company is making progress on embedding these change leadership behaviors in a variety of leaders, people managers primarily, at a variety of levels. So it's not just having qualified role players in the organization anymore. It's really starting to integrate those behaviors and those capabilities more broadly. And the focus here is less on tools or skills that are needed, but really shifting more to an outcomes focus. So how does behaving in this way deliver the outcome that's required on this particular initiative, for instance? Here, the key word is really around influence. right? It is helping people to behave in ways that are consistent with what they say they want. And here, the folks who are supporting this, change leads, project leads, and so forth, really are viewed as coaches in the organization, right? You're not just helping me, but I'm coming to you for advice on some of my most confidential and sensitive issues because I really trust you. And once we have those conversations, I go away and I actually act on the input that you have given me. And then finally, Change Acceleration, these are organizations who have figured out how to really mainstream these leadership behaviors in the organization such that they can make changes happen really fast, right? It's more than just getting ready for the change. It really is about initiating, anticipating, putting these things into motion. This really requires a high level of business acumen. At this level, from change leadership on, a change manager and a business line leader are virtually indistinguishable from one another because they have such deep knowledge of the business. And at this stage, you're really working at the C-level as a trusted advisor. You're a go-to person that someone is calling first, right? Before as they start anticipating some of their strategic changes, you're the one who's being pulled in on some of these. And so, as I see it, these are the phases of maturity that companies go through. And what we really need to do is figure out where are we, where's our company, and where are we relative to that in terms of our own skill sets. So what I'd like to have you do is pull out the change capabilities assessment, and let's kind of develop this a little bit together to give you a sense of where you are relative to what your company needs and how you could potentially play a more value-added role. So once you have that in front of you, what I'd like to ask you to do is think about first, how much turbulence is going on in your business right now? So put an X on that axis based upon, do you have high, medium, or low turbulence going on in your business? And what level of results are expected, independent from that? High, medium, low, let's say. So put an X on those two axes, and then let's kind of connect the dots and get a sense of where's the upper end of the capabilities that we need to have in place. And then once you do that, let's think about where the actual capabilities are. Now, I'm making an assumption here, just for effect, that the actual capabilities in your company are perhaps lower than the required capabilities. That's not always true, but I have to say, in probably 90% of the cases it is. But if it's not for you, that's okay. I mean, that's a good place to be, right? Where you have more capabilities than are needed. That could potentially be a costly proposition, but it's good news in terms of having those when you need them. But as I say, for most companies, it really seems to shake out that the actual capabilities are lower. Now, they may not be so low as ad hoc change. Maybe they're up near change management, or perhaps even a little further up than that. But no matter where that lower line is, this represents an area of opportunity for you, because to the extent that you have capabilities in place, it helps you to realize the business benefits of initiatives that you and your leaders are working on in the company. And that's valuable. That has dollars and cents value, that has reputational value. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But this is really the organizational area of opportunity. My last question for you, and this is one that you need to really try to think objectively about right now that you've got this visual in front of you, is where is your skill level at individually? So plot your capabilities somewhere along this curve, because it starts to point out to the fact, is your company ahead of you? Do you need to build capabilities just to keep up with your organization? Are the actual capabilities of your company lagging behind, and you could play a significant role in helping them build that capability? So go ahead and, as I was talking about what each of these could look like, kind of try to think about where do you fit into this picture, okay? And so an important thing to think about here is that no matter where you plotted yourself on the continuum today, your professional net worth is going to move up as you move up the continuum. Now, I know I'm introducing a new term, so let's go ahead and define it. But for now, understand that as you're going, let's say, from a point of change management to a point of change leadership, you have significantly more net worth accruing. Okay, so when we talk about net worth, this is what I mean. Net worth, professional net worth, PNW, is a measure of your professional impact, influence, and income at a given point in time. So it can change over the course of your career. It can change when you change consulting assignments at companies. It can change when you change roles inside a company. So it's worth keeping in mind, when you're making decisions about your next assignment, what am I going to be able to contribute to the company, and what am I going to be able to get in return? And I have to say, I find that this concept sometimes is a little controversial for people, though I don't necessarily view it that way. I know that there have been a lot of change managers trained through the years who have been taught to sort of recede into the background and work from the shadows. And it's not to say that's a bad thing. That we do need to be comfortable working from there in certain situations. But somehow that's gotten translated into feeling less valued or feeling less worth. And that's problematic because that affects our ability to influence and have impact. All right. So to the extent that we look at these sort of all three of them individually and then how they work together, I think it will help to bring some explanatory value to explanatory power to some of the sentiments that you may have felt through the years. So the first one, let's go through impact first. Impact is the level of tangible value and contribution. So it could be the financial impact that you help to contribute on projects. It could be other types of things, company reputation, building new company capabilities like shared services and things like that. But there's one thing that it always means, which is leading, let's say, or working on a $1 million or a $10 million global initiative versus a $50,000 department project, definitely is a higher level of impact. And this also has to do with things like your credibility and capability and reputation for delivering that value. So impact is really the first one, and it is financial is definitely a part of it, but it's not all of it. It really has to do with contribution. The next one is influence. And this is the extent to which you're able to persuade and influence others to behave in ways that get the outcomes they say they want, the outcomes that they've committed to. So for instance, shaping your sponsor to exhibit the necessary behavior reliably, right, at exactly the right time and place that you need it to drive outcomes. So it's less of a hit and miss proposition and something that you feel much more confident about, being able to influence sponsors, or even better, sponsor leadership teams, for instance, who have trouble getting aligned, who need to make decisions and prioritization. And the last one is about income. And part of that is what sounds, what means what it sounds like, which is it's really about, though, being able to persuade other people to behave in ways that get the outcomes you want. And this is about, one of these things is about income, dollars and cents, right? The income that you value in return for your contribution. But it doesn't just have to be about money. It can be about getting time off or better assignments or being put on choice projects, right? But to the extent that you have impact and influence, the value the outcomes that you want, it's easier for you to negotiate those things for yourself. So it's about shaping sponsors and leaders to provide rewards you value instead of just the things that they want. Right. And so you start to feel this sort of value equation coming back into sync, right? Instead of you're just a hired gun, a pair of hands, come in and do what we need, and we're unavailable to be influenced. This is really about bringing that equation back into balance so that you are bringing the impact to the company, but you are also getting some things out of it that are important to you. So let's take a look at the professional net worth assessment. And this is a shorter version of an assessment that we do in the program that Jeff referenced earlier, but I really wanted you today to get an essence of, am I really getting, am I really professionally having the impact and getting what I want out of what I'm contributing? So go ahead and pull that out. We'll walk through these briskly. So the first question, the first three actually around impact. In my company, have I earned a wide reputation for consistently delivering major results? Do people know who you are and associate you with being on big critical projects in the organization? Or are you sort of more of that role player person who works on departmental projects? Now, maybe that's something by choice, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you really want to move up that scale towards having higher levels of influence in the organization, obviously, to the extent that you can impact more broadly is helpful. Are executives treating you first as a business leader or as a change manager? Right. So this gets to, do they have a concept of you of someone who is really driving business value, or do they have a concept of you as being overhead and somebody who helps and maybe can grease the skids a little, and yeah, what you do is good, but you're definitely not on the same plane as a business leader. So go ahead and rate yourself on that one. The third question around impact, do you find that pushing your way in isn't necessary? In other words, you don't have to go in and knock on the door and sell your services and give the business case around change management and all that kind of stuff. Based on what you contribute, you are acknowledged as a go-to resource who's pulled in to deliver value on the big stuff in your company rather than having to knock down doors. Second category, influence. How are you dealing with politics? Is that one of your strengths? Because for you really to have higher levels of impact and income, you really need to be effective at ethically dealing with political situations in the company that deal with your initiative and also that deal with your sponsor and you. So do you have people in the company that you can work with and really effectively deal with those politics? Are senior executives calling on you as an advisor? So in what capacity are they using you? Are they using you at the high end of that scale that we showed a minute ago? Are they using you as a change leader, a change accelerator who's really working on the sophisticated change stuff? Or are they looking for you to bring in the capacity plan, the change management plan, the communications items? You may do all of those things, but what's the primary role that you are being asked to do? Is it the higher, more sophisticated end of the spectrum where you're really influencing them, or is it further down the continuum where you're doing a bit more hands-on activity? Are you able to confidently, and I would add here consistently, shape your sponsor's behavior to get the behaviors that you need from them? Can you get them to go to the town hall? Can you get them to say things that are difficult? Can you get them to make unpopular decisions about their team members? Can you get them to prioritize? This is the tough stuff, right? And lots of us, I think, like to believe that we're always moving forward in our careers. We're always making progress, but at times we need to sort of slow down and say, am I really accomplishing what I want to with my sponsor? I've got all these great change management skills, but when I take that next step and I really am trying to influence behavior, I sometimes have challenges with that. And then finally, around income. The recognition I receive from leaders and peers confirms for me that my work is valued. So I'm not necessarily talking about formal recognition, walk up on the stage at the end of a project and be given an award. Although that's really nice, especially if it comes in the form of a little bonus check or something like that, right? Something where you're acknowledged. What I mean here is really about on a day-to-day basis, are you feeling like what you're contributing and all of the hard work and the time that you're spending making that contribution as you look around the organization, is it valued? Because to me, I consider that a part of my income. If I'm working in a place that's not valued, that detracts from my compensation as far as I'm concerned. The second one is about compensation. So, I think we'd all like to make more money. This isn't about walking in tomorrow and asking about a raise, but it is about, can you feel good about where you are right now in terms of what you're getting in terms of your compensation? Does it reflect the market? Does it reflect your true contribution? And are you able to negotiate other stuff that you value? Maybe it's flex time. Maybe it's working from home. Maybe it's working remotely. Maybe it's getting on different types of projects. Maybe it is being mentored by a particular leader. Do you have the personal credibility based upon your impact that you are able to go in and negotiate those other types of things for yourself? So let me just pause here for a second. I'm going to move my control panel over a bit. And let me just pause here and kind of get a sense for where are you at on this continuum? What are some things that are popping up for you that are challenge areas that you'd like to work on? And we'll probably have a little time lag here, so I'm going to pause just for a second so that you can chat some of those in.
While we're doing that, Kimberly, I can comment too. This is the point at which, when you did your original talk and I started rating myself, I saw major gaps, even though I was quite successful in the programs I was working on, just not having that level of influence I wanted. In fact, I was working at the time with a sponsor where I just was not able to get the behaviors I was looking for. So this illuminated some of the things I could start working on.
Good, that's helpful, Jeff. Someone Angie has just chatted in company A, I had a relatively high professional net worth. In a different company, a relatively low one. How do I ensure more consistency between companies' assignments that's more dependent on my expertise and less on corporate culture? That really has to do with your influence skills. You need to really be able to go from environment to environment, have a high level of interpersonal flexibility and a high level of influence skills to quickly be able to identify the challenge behaviors that you're going to come up with. Because no matter what corporate culture you're in, whether you're in a startup or a large complex organization with operating challenges, let's say, there's going to be a set of behaviors that you need to deal with, and those are going to come up all the time in that company. And so to the extent that you develop your influence skills so you can identify what those are and consistently be able to impact those and get what you need, that really is the secret sauce, Angie. And I can really resonate with what you're saying. Before I was at Merck, I spent about 13 years in outsourcing, and I had a couple different roles there. I was a VP of HR, I was a vice president of organization development and organization effectiveness, and a big part, all of us were expected to participate in business development, pulling together proposals and contracts for new clients. And so in that time, I think I worked in about 18 different industries, all with totally different operating models, services, manufacturing, high tech, pharmaceutical, you name it. And what you start to see is that, yes, there are differences between companies and industries, but as your influence skills become more refined, you kind of already know going into a situation what some of the hot behaviors are going to be that you need to influence. And after a while, you get really good at that. Walking in the door, you know what to expect, and you have a skill set that you can use. What about the level of inertia that exists in the organization? I don't mean to imply here that we're going to be able to solve everything. Culture is a big thing to overcome, but one thing that I always like to ask people to reframe around a little bit is, a couple things. First, you're a huge point of leverage in your company, right? One of the things that we talk about in our programs is, how do you take you and multiply you by 1,000 so that you've got leaders and managers out there doing it the way you would do it, right? So there's a very specific way of doing that, sort of, replicating the good stuff that you bring and making it possible even easier for other people to do it too. So that's one thing you can do, is to sort of multiply the power of you. The second thing is, I think culture and inertia often get used as sort of, they're put out there as obstacles. Culture eats strategy for lunch. Yeah, all that stuff, we know it. So what are we supposed to do? Stop? Do nothing? That's not an option. We can't just all go home. So we need to figure out what to do. And what I always ask people to think about is, corporate culture may be pressing down on you and your initiative, but initiatives can be used as Trojan horses to introduce entirely new ways of behaving and operating into the organization. And that's where most of us live. And to me, that's one of the most important parts of what we do, that despite the organization culture, yeah, we need to account for that. But we also need to think of creative ways on our own initiatives to start in very small and local ways, introducing new behaviors. Another question. Do you think that another important element is whether you're working as an internal employee or an external consultant? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a big difference between those two things. At the same time, I have to say, I think that external people never do enough to transfer knowledge to internal people. I can remember working with the executive committee at Merck, and I was positively infuriated by the fact that our consultants, who we had paid millions of dollars to, were having closed-door meetings without our change leads knowing about it, right? I mean, so there are downsides to having senior external consultants in, right? It seems that they never quite transfer enough knowledge. I think one of the big barriers for an internal employee is that they never feel like they can quite say the hard stuff. And my coaching, whether you're internal or external, is, from my perspective, there is more runway that we can take with our sponsors, with our senior people, to coach them around difficult issues than we're actually taking right now. Because fear and anxiety and call it low value esteem, right? What we think they value affects how we talk to them. And so in a lot of cases, that's not to say we should take any accountability for our sponsors doing their jobs. But in most cases that I see, there is quite a bit more runway that we could be taking around how the working agreement we have with them, how we coach them, the way we're able to talk to them to get what's needed on the project, than we're actually taking. The other thing that I always like people to think about is how to identify when a sponsor is uncoachable. And most sponsors are not uncoachable. They are coachable, but they don't necessarily have the desire, and we don't necessarily have the skill, and that's the gap that needs to be closed. Yeah, so Lynn says, I find the project manager has access to the sponsor, but I don't on some projects. I'm trying to influence through the project manager. Tricky. Yeah, tricky is one word. Also, I would add, if you don't mind, annoying, frustrating. Whenever we're in a positions to influence through other people, this used to happen to me a lot. When I went to Merck, I was a change lead in HR. And the thing that was challenging about that was that the lead HR person really saw himself as the linkage to the sponsor. And so I had to influence him to influence the sponsor. And it gets distorted. And again, I think this gets back to the role that we negotiate for ourselves with the project managers and in the PMOs, and really up-leveling how we talk about our role, because a lot of times we talk about our roles as the tools we bring and the activities that we do, as opposed to the value that we bring. Change leadership to me is mostly about speed. It's about returning to people to productivity after their routine has been disrupted. And there's a real dollars and cents value that we can put on that I think often is not articulated. So I'm going to take one more question, and then we're going to keep rolling because I'm looking at the time. Is it challenging to justify our value when our first point of contact is staffing that represents us? If they're setting your rates and presenting you to the client, that is challenging. But, when you walk through the door, you can completely reframe what people are thinking about you. And so I think that it can be a hindrance. I think whenever we're not representing ourselves, it can be a hindrance. But to the extent that you bowl them over with your capabilities once you're in there, and they see that you're not a pair of hands, that you're far more than that, you might not be able to do much about your rate on this project, but you may in the future, for instance. So I know we have more questions. You're welcome, Kim. I know we have more questions, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna keep rolling here. So give some thought to where are you really, and where do you want to be? I'm not here to tell you that you should be moving towards being a strategic advisor. As a matter of fact, if you think back to this slide, the way I really visualize this is sort of a pyramid turned on its side. We've got tons of people doing this kind of work, but as you start moving up the hierarchy, we've got fewer people doing that. And that's one of the reasons that they become more valuable, right? Because you don't have tons and tons of them. As we move forward in developing ourselves and developing our sponsors, our stock will go down. And 10 years from now, change leadership is probably going to be down here, and we'll be talking about something else. But for the foreseeable future, doing whatever we can, if we want to have a higher level of professional net worth, moving ourselves up into more of a change leadership mode really is where it's at. And so that really is my domain. I spent a lot of time thinking about this and observing in lots of different environments. And this is how the strategic engagement skills help us. And there are not 1,000 things you need to do. There aren't even 100. There's a handful. So this is something that can be mastered. And these are about storytelling. How do you take something from being a data set into something that moves people to action? And it's much more than just the why, right? It is on neuroscience level, lighting up the brain so that they feel compelled to take action, not just that it's just another choice. Positioning yourself. If I had to star one thing on this list, this would be the one that I star because it affects all the other ones so often. And I can tell that you're experiencing this too, because of the way you're being quarterbacked into companies or the people who you're working with. We are often not positioned to influence in the way we want to, and that's a problem. And it's often correctable. And if it's not, then you need to at least know the criteria so you can look at the situation and say, I'm not going to be successful here. I'm not going to be able to influence the outcomes that they want me to. And I think this is one I'm going to say no to. Or if I say yes, I'm going to really explain what we're all in for, so that we all have sort of a realistic preview of what's coming. Alignment is really about leader decisions and prioritization. Facilitation is really about working with teams, particularly in a project environment and in a network environment. Coaching is about how do you get through to middle managers and get them telling this compelling story when you may be miles or continents away from them, right? So how do you persuade people through others? Engagement, which I think most is sort of where the most traditional change management lives, is really about getting people energized and making it over the hump. Oh, I apologize. And finally, accountability. We used to talk about sustainability, but for me, it comes down to how do you actually set the hooks so that people continue making these changes even after you have exited the project, for instance. So this is really the mandate. Get yourself in a strategic role. Help leaders get aligned and make decisions and prioritize. Get really good at spontaneously facilitating, and I don't mean standing at a flip chart. I mean really being able to move with project managers and teams and networks sort of on the fly. Learn to persuade people through others. Get people excited kind of from a distance to do the hard thing and then move on and then create that accountability. The challenge is, and I'm looking at my time, so I'm going to go through these really fast. There are challenges to becoming a change leader. If I've been counting through the years, the MBAs and engineers and psychologists and coaches and Sigma people and change managers who have come through, that I've come into contact with in my network or who have come through my programs. And there is no discipline that identifies what these strategic engagement skills are. These are the how. Everybody teaches you the what. They give you the tools, right? The forms, the tools, the books, all those things. Nobody teaches you the influence skills to actually maneuver in the organization to get these things used. And, who do people go to? I did a survey in 2012 and said, who do you go to for your change management advice? Your boss? And people said, no, I don't really go to my boss. Either they don't respect what I do or, I'll look like I should know the answer when I don't. Consultants, well, they sort of have their own interests in mind at times, and I'm not sure if that's a relationship I can really trust or if they're really giving me everything I need. The number one answer was peer. We go to our peers. And while that's good because I think, we all feel that sense of community, what everybody added to this is, but I'm not sure where they're getting information from. They might just be Googling it, so and they're giving me their opinion rather than what really works. we have very little time and resources. Capability building is not naturally integrated, right? We're all on the run, on the fly. There's a lot of competition, right? Everybody wants to have more impact. Not everybody, many people want to have more impact and make more money. And I think the biggest one is that, hey, we actually may need to make some changes in our own behavior and in the way that we think and work in order to move ourselves up that scale. So, I work with a lot of people who want to get to the next level and who often have frustrations, particularly around dealing with sponsors. And for sure, the work that we do is much harder than coming to work each day and being a status quo manager, right? We have a specialized skill set that isn't widely understood, and we don't know how to use it to kind of get to the next level. And some years ago, I was experiencing this myself. I'd say maybe 13 years ago, 14 years ago. And I started thinking, well, maybe do I need to do something differently? Do I need to change my mindset? And for the answer for me was yeah. So I figured it out. And the result of that was I'm here now, doing work that I love, making top income, getting to work on projects that really make a difference. And I have a life. And I always want to affirm for you, these things are entirely possible, right? Now is a good time. The bar is going up. You're in a difficult market. You need some ways to differentiate yourself. And so it's a good time to learn some new things. And for me, I packaged all that up into something that I call strategic engagement skills because first of all, we've got 50 years of behavioral research that we know is real. We've got another 15 years of applied research that I did in various companies and industries, boiled it down into something that's very straightforward and easily consumed. And, it's to me, I think of it as an approach that kind of gets past all the tools and the tactics and the actions that we need to take and demystifies this change stuff into something that's much more about where should I focus my influence, right? How do I get the behaviors from various people that I need in the organization? And so what we do, pick a change methodology. It doesn't really matter which one it is. This is one that I use, but we need to start out by having that compelling story and working with the leaders, working with the teams, working with middle-level managers, rank and file employees, holding everybody accountable, and us sort of, helping that along the way. But pick your methodology. That's much less important. What's different is how you do it, right? And that's really where these engagement or influence skills. So each of these steps that you take during the life cycle of a change, you're focusing on specific groups of people. Well, how are you influencing them? Well, sponsors need a clear, compelling story that can be shared with the organization that's based in data, but that moves people to action. Leadership teams need to make better decisions, and you need to how to navigate those politics. You need to be able to work really well across networks and with project teams. Need to know how to use other people's authority and influence and persuasion to get to the middle of the organization that you always aren't working with those people directly, so that they can engage the associates, and ultimately we can get those accountability agreements in place. But all of this, from this perspective, normally I like to put the customer at the center of everything. But when it comes to these skills, you really need to be positioned to be the influencer, the guide in all of this, because if you're not, who's going to be? Somebody's going to fill that leadership vacuum. From my perspective, it may as well be us. But it really is about the mindsets and skills to influence differently. By the way, these skills, one of the big challenges that we had at Merck was that we had Sigma, we had PMBOK, we had ProSci, we had Connor Partners, we had Cotter, you name it, we had pretty much every methodology you could shake a stick at. In addition, we had Bain and McKinsey and Deloitte, and they were all there at the same time. And we had the war of the methods, right? Whose is going to win? And we went through a lot of work internally, and that's waste. The customer doesn't care about that stuff, but we had to do it because it was getting in the way. And what we really concluded was, boy, if we ever had to do this again, we would do this differently. And so when I went away and built an approach, I built something that I would want to buy now, which is if someone says to me they have a heavy operational excellence presence in their organization, the strategic engagement skills fit into that. If they got a heavy PMO, bias towards PMO, hey, strategic engagement skills layer into that too. They're completely methodology agnostic. Plus, they don't give you a set of instructions. They give you sets of questions to ask and guidelines so that they look less like this is not stage gated, right? These aren't stage gated. You could use these at any time. And by using a set of assessments, you can figure out, hey, for instance, Inspire, I've got a challenging sponsor. I'm going to need to do a lot of work with her throughout the course of this implementation. In terms of guide, hey, I've got some decent skills. I might need to learn some things along the way, but I don't need to do everything in this whole category, right? And if I don't have it, it doesn't mean I'm going to stop and not move on. And really the way I see these skills is that they're like a fingerprint on every initiative, or DNA for a different initiative. You just kind of take some touch points along the way and say, what is the next thing that I need to be influencing around, right, to get what is needed to make this project successful. So it's much more sort of agile way of thinking about how do we move the project forward. And it for sure isn't about, filling out forms and checklists and reports and tools. It's about using yourself as an influencer and helping other people to influence. So strategic engagement skills, if you think about where we spend our time on these things, where in the center we spend our time is less on the what, even though we have all these things, methodology and process and tools, we spend a lot more time on the how, right? Because most people tell me they've already been through some change management stuff, they've got some experience, and they're still finding that something is missing. And so usually the something that's missing is this. And so that's the area that we focus on. So real quickly, the bar on change capability is going up. Change leadership is the direction of the future, and you can be differentiated in your field if you start to make moves in that direction. And in addition to improving company results, it'll also enhance your professional net worth. And we talked briefly about what those 7 are: storytelling, alignment, facilitation, coaching, energize, accountability, and positioning, which cuts across all of them. Next time, we've got 3 more objectives. So the first, to develop, to share with you a fact base that I built. When I say fact base, I mean statistics and data that support how strategic engagement skills can improve and influence project realization rates. I'll tell you, when I was practicing inside corporations, I never had the time to do this. And so I went out, I did a huge literature review and pulled together everything I could really from the last 10 years with a focus on the last 5 years about project realization and how we really contribute, and have created a business case around that I think you'll find useful. It's about a 10-page or so white paper that we'll share. Inside of that white paper is an assessment that can help you understand how well you or your project are doing on the strategic engagement skills today, and sort of do a pattern analysis and say, hey, here's where we've got some strengths, and here's potentially where I could focus on some gaps that would make a difference for me. And then I'm going to share with you for each of the 7 some a resource or 2 and some immediate actions that you can take to improve in that area. All right. So I know that we've gone through this. Quickly. Jeff, I think at this point we've got about 9 minutes left. I think I'm going to turn it over to you, and we can start heading towards home.
Yeah, for sure. It's worth commenting on a couple things, and one of them is I know, because I've got a number of people in the audience that share the same background as myself, do work in change management. You might get the sense of this is targeting those working in the area of change management. You've got some of that phraseology in there, but the reality is, even for leaders, and we've got some of those folks interested as well, you're at an executive level, it's often the case that's still not getting the level of traction and results that they're looking for. So the term you used around waste is an important one, because we see that in a lot of projects still, where organizations are saying, yeah, we've got the strategy, we know what we want to do, we've started execution, but they're still not getting the results they want. And so we find that these engagement skills often lie at the root cause of some of those issues. We've not done a great job of aligning our peers at an executive level, or our management peers, or really working down through the organization of getting the alignment on the messaging. So these skills really apply regardless of the level at which you're working today. It's interesting to me in talking to organizations, that with one of my recent conversations, even going through those 7 basic skills, right off the top, you know what, we do sales all the time and we're just not getting it on the storytelling part. We understand how important that is of inspiring the audience to get them to uptake and align, but we really struggle to tell that story, and many leaders do. And the program did a great job of allowing practical approaches to doing some of these things, and the opportunity to rehearse those. So lots in here. So as Kimberly mentioned, there's more materials available. We have the part 2 of this program coming. Would encourage you to come if you can. I'll certainly communicate out the replay if you can't make it. But for now, we want to make sure folks are aware. This program is coming to Calgary, and I'll be hosting that here. And that'll go through those 7 skills in much more detail, and again, the practical side of applying those. Let's go to the next slide. Important to note that this is something that hasn't been running for a while. As Kimberly mentioned, she's been investing her own experience as well as a ton of research that's available pointing towards what are these key skills that are required. So this really takes our ability to practice up another level. We've seen success with many of the large companies engaging in these kind of programs. Let's go to the next one. And lots of folks willing to say how much they appreciated the things that came out of it. I saw some of this, obviously, in the program that I was on with folks at very senior levels saying there was very practical elements that they could apply when they were looking to influence others and, again, raise the level of results they were seeing on their programs. So here's the scoop. To cut to the chase, the regular price of this program is $21.95. Kimberly and I have talked about this, and we really want to acknowledge a few things. One, this is the first run of the program in Canada, and we recognize there's some challenges today. Can't ignore that. So we said, all right, well, let's acknowledge that. First of all, hey, if folks want to sign up, we'll discount that. We have a $17.95 starting price for those who are willing to sign up by the end of the month. And even after that, before we run the program in February, if you sign up, we'll still keep the pricing down to $19.95. There are other options as well. If you feel you can pull together a group within your organization, we've got even better rates for that. And finally, if you have a place where you want us to deliver it, well, we'll be locking in on a site shortly, but if you want to host it, we can provide some incentives around that as well. So in Scoop, that's it. I certainly can say I took tons of value out of taking the program, was immediately able to apply this and see major benefits with the program that I was working on, and saw myself moving up that scale from pair of hands that provided good input and some good tactics into someone that was drawn in as a strategic advisor who was at the table when important decisions were being made and able to build and maintain those relationships with other senior folks. So I can personally attest to the value that comes out of this kind of program. Certainly, you've got my contact info there. I think pretty much everyone knows who I am anyways. Feel free to reach out if you have questions. If you have comments, additional comments around this program, we will be posting the replay. I'll send that out. But you can reach me as well if you have further questions. Kimberly, do you want to end there or take a look at any of the other questions we have?
We've got 4 minutes, so I say we run it right to the end if we can, Jeff. So we have a question from Dawn. Is February 24, 25 a course that's coming? Like to get a request in front of my boss. I need help. Yes, it is, Dawn. It's coming to Calgary. I'm coming to Calgary to support Jeff in delivery. So we will be there together. This afternoon after we end this session, I will send out an email that has more details. It can show you, I'll send you the brochure, so you've got some more information, and I'll show you where you can go to the site and actually register. But we're coming, so thank you for that. Natalia asks, in a very small company, when I answer these questions as the owner, there are not really any executive colleagues within my company. is it best to look then outside my network of peers in the same industry to value my professional net worth? Or is it better to consider these questions with respect to the influence and impact on my clients? Those are really good questions. I mean, it is sort of both of those things. I find in being a company owner that I would almost rate my professional net worth one way as I think about myself and my peers and other company owners. And then when I think about impact with clients, I would think about it slightly differently. So I think there's value in thinking about it both ways. But if I really, really tying those two things together, they are together, right? Running or being in a high level in a small company, you need to be able to deliver those results to clients. And rather than being change leaders, project leaders, Sigma leaders, and business development leaders, we've got a big diversity of folks on the line. To me, what cuts across all of us is that we all provide solutions. Right? Whatever discipline we happen to work in, we're providing a solution. And so I think rating our value relative to the contribution we make, the solutions that we provide, is probably going to give us the most objective answer to that question. Hope that helps. Other questions? I'm not sure if I answer this. The one from Elizabeth, I did answer that. When you have agencies that are setting rates and presenting you to the client. Sorry, just scanning through these. See if
Kimberly, I know we had a couple other questions around what the outcome of the program would be, certification.
Oh, sure. So glad to answer that. So this is a certificate program. In other words, you finish this program and you are welcome to put on your resume that you have a certificate in strategic engagement skills. Put it in your LinkedIn profile as a credential, of course. This is a prerequisite to a deeper course that I do and that I deliver myself, oftentimes virtually, because we have small handfuls of senior people who are participating from various countries. And that program is a certification in change leadership coaching. In other words, you become a coach. So this is, what are all the influence tactics I need to think about? How do I fill my quiver with all kinds of influence tactics? And then the certification is over a period of 8 weeks, working with a small peer group and me to actually apply those to projects. And, we really learn about things like influencing performance management and scorecards, thinking about your career path and and how to develop along your career path, how to mature a change capability, a change leadership capability across your organization. What's the model to do that? So we work on very advanced skills in that class. I would say that this is an intermediate level course for folks that have been through ProSci or AIM or something like that and have said, hey, I got a great bag of tools, but I really now want to learn the influence skills. And then once you learn the influence skills, working together to really apply those is what gets you the change leadership coach certification. And that's the slightly longer program that Jeff went through with me. All right. Any other questions? You're welcome, Natalia. She says she sees a lot of value in applying the knowledge and skills across the different areas. Does a lot with municipal politics. Interesting. Yeah. I've done a lot of work myself with quasi-government agencies, which are completely different from public companies. So a fascinating domain to work in, I think, Natalia. Change is always happening. Yes, for sure. So we're right at our time. Does anyone have any other questions? As I said, I'm going to be sending out an email to you with the brochure, some additional details and links. I have a white paper in there on the professional net worth, and I can include that as well if you want a little bit more information on that. Okay. So I think that's it for us, Jeff. I don't see any additional questions. I know for my part, I'd like to say thanks, and I'm looking forward to coming back next Thursday, January 21st. We didn't have necessarily the same list of people enrolled in that, so I'm not sure if maybe we should include, Jeff, the link to next Thursday when we send out that note today, and then anybody who might have missed it the first time around can participate.
You bet. Sounds
awesome.
Good.
So you're also going to get a short survey to take this afternoon to provide some feedback on how you think today went, and give us anything else that you think we need to know to keep making this program as good as it can possibly be. So thank you so much. Jeff, thank you for hosting me and for making this happen. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you, Kimberly, and thanks to everyone who took the time.
Nice to meet you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye now.